Welcome. We are on to episode 120 of the My First Job podcast. Data analyst jobs have exploded over the past couple of decades as the amount of data generated every day has grown exponentially. So, what exactly do data analysts do? That's what we're going to find out today. And we have just the right person for that. Kanika Kharbanda started working with the data early on. She's a customer intelligence analyst at Texas Instruments, making sense of high volume data, building dashboards that help management make important decisions, and automating processes that are otherwise time consuming and manual. Over the past 8 years at TI, she has taken on roles in development, analytics, and project management, getting little insights into bits of everything in IT that TI does. But there's still a lot unexplored. She's played several roles internally, driven multiple reporting initiatives, optimized systems, mentored interns, developed applications, and dealt with transitions of legacy code. Her work sits at the intersection of logic and business impact. And we'll figure out exactly what that means. So to begin the show, let me bring Kanika on board and let's go through what she's been up to so far. Kanika, welcome to the show.
Hi, Venu. Thank you so much for having me here.
Pleasure. So, Kanika, Texas Instrument is your first job, right? It's where you
Yes,
started out.
yes. First company out of
Okay.
college. Yeah,
Which is marvelous because you normally have people switching so many jobs in the first few years, but you've obviously found what you love and what you like doing. So, take me through one of the early bits of where did you study? How did the Texas Instruments job happen? What led up to it?
sure, Venu. To get started, right, I actually haven't done engineering, but I am a computer engineer. And how that happened is that I did my bachelor's of computer applications and I did my master's of computer application. So someone in the 10th grade told me that you can do BCA and MCA and still land a job in the IT. And I think that worked
Okay.
for me because I was not a huge fan of physics and chemistry. So, and I did not want to give the entrance exam. So that's what I did. Um, and after, during my master's, once the placements began in the month of August, Texas Instruments was one of the first companies that came in, and I interviewed for it. Regular interview process. We had the aptitude test, we had a group discussion, technical rounds at the campus, and then I was hired for the internship. And then we had like a 6 month internship, which after which they decided that they would hire or not hire me for a full time role, which worked out. And 8
Okay.
years later, here I am.
So, was that a slightly nervous period, or you got hints of how things were going during your internship? What are the kind of projects you worked on during that time?
Uh, so, the internship process at Texas Instruments was definitely one of my favorites because it was really organized. It was very well uh, designed for um, knowing what the intern is actually like. And they were really invested in that process. And while we're doing projects at during our internship, we're not doing POCs. We are not proof of concepts. We're not doing projects that will go away at the end of the internship. The project that all of us, we were 12 interns, all the projects that we worked on were deployed within 1.5 years of us being a part of the organization. Right. And I think that was one of the best parts. And the um internship itself was quite strict. We had like a mid-term review, we had an end-term review, so we had to like present both times, showcase our projects. So the project that I was working on was so I was a part of the system administration team. I was an application developer there, and something that I was trying to automate, help them was So currently, if anyone wanted a virtual desktop, like any of the engineers, they would raise a ticket and there would be a little bit of back and forth whether, hey, how much space do you want, and all of that. And there was one dedicated person who would run like about three commands in Linux to assign the virtual desktop to the person. And obviously very time consuming because the number of people asking for this was growing every single day. So I developed a web application where the user could just log in to the application, mention their specifications, and the approval mail would directly go to their manager, and the system would be allocated to them in like less than 24 hours. So we're saving time. We're making
So earlier, how long would
less.
it take?
I think it was about a 4 or 5 day process,
Wow,
including the
that's a lot of
approvals
time
and
saving.
everything. Yes, yes. I think that is one of the
Yeah,
beauties of automation, right? Where we're like cutting down time into like more than 50% in most
yeah,
cases. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, and it's great when you can see your work actually help people
Yes,
during the course of whatever you do. Otherwise, you do
yes.
something, and if the client is deploying it, in most cases, you will not get to see what your
Right.
work is actually, what's happening on the job that you did. Whereas here, you
Yes,
say, hey, I did that, I did this. So you have a very
yes.
clear idea of what you've contributed to, and which is marvelous.
Yes,
So,
it's true.
the earlier thing was all about building applications. So, what was your first brush with data? What is it that you started working with?
Yeah. So, for the first 5 years, I was in the applications domain. But in the applications domain, about 3 years later, um, it kind of gets mundane, right? When you're working on one application all the time.
Right.
So at TI, we're always encouraged to work on something different, collaborate with different teams. So, one of the best parts of the internship was that I had an idea of what all are the different teams in TI and what everyone is doing, right? So, you kind of know a gist of everything, and it always keeps you interested in knowing what you can do with other domains as well. So one day we're all like sitting in a room. We're all a bunch of developers, a little crunched in terms of resources for a project, and I just think that, I mean, we have so much data in terms of how many projects we're working on, how many bugs we're resolving, how many projects are coming in, and how many people we are at. And I think the resource management can just like, get better if we understood what is happening with our data, right? So I quickly, gathered all the information that I needed. I knew there is a tool called Spotfire that helps us build reports because I had like worked with the data team for a small bit of project, and I was like, why don't I like create a report and like showcase this to my manager, and I did that, and we changed the way we were working on projects. We changed the way everyone was allocated on different projects, and I think for me that was one of the ticking points where I realized the power of data and how much it can change the way people take decisions, right? And I think that's when I started exploring and making more reports for our team internally. And I came across opening in TI itself. So another great bit of this is where after about 4 or 5 years, I wanted to look out for a change, and but my first preference was to look out for a change internally, because what happens with that is you already have so much knowledge in terms
Mm.
of how the company works, and what are the technicalities that we are working with, what are the different teams that we have. And I think I wanted to add value with my existing experience in a new domain. uh, so I saw this internal jobs opportunity, and I like dropped them an email, and we had a set of interviews, and I showcased my existing dashboards that I built, and they loved it, and I joined the data team. And even though I say that it is the same organization, it felt also a little like a different organization, because they had different processes in the organization. They had um, their day looked really different, right? So in a way, there was comfort, but also a lot of newness, right? And I think that was
Wonderful.
really exciting. Yeah.
I think that's a very important point, Kanika, because people believe that newness comes from working with a new organization. But when it's a large organization and there are so many departments and so many pathways to learn, you'll get a lot more out of understanding other things that the company does and literally reinvent yourself while you acquire the experience. So, I guess there's a huge amount of learning that comes in merely because you shift departments
Yeah.
and suddenly you get a perspective which is very different from what you were doing earlier.
Yeah.
But there is this thing in the market saying that no, unless I move to a different place, I will not be seen as, progressing with my career, which I think is the wrong approach because if you're learning and you're enjoying the people you're working with, you're acquiring so much of experience that it's
I
worth
agree
it.
completely. I completely agree. Yeah.
And it's so hard to find people who gel together as a team. I think that's the
Yes.
other part that people don't pay much attention to because they think, oh, I'll adjust. You can't
Yeah.
adjust because there are personal equations which develop over time.
Yes.
And the longer you
Definitely.
stay in a place, the more your understanding of how the organization works, how your own contributions help to develop things, and there's a history that you create. So you moved into data. Now, what were some of the early things that you did, and how did it influence how you were working?
So in the data team,
Pardon me?
in the data team, uh, things
Yeah,
that
in
I
the
did.
data team.
Yeah, in the
Yes, yes, yes.
okay. So a couple of things, right? So it's like you're getting a new job, and you are at a new level of you already know what you can do better, right? From your learnings of promotions and like even projects in your previous team, right? So a couple of things that I think were important and different here were understanding the data, right? I think in my previous role, I had always had a very task driven approach initially when I joined the company, where I was like, okay, this is given to me, I'm going to like explore this and I'm going to like, give the solution. But here in the data domain, I wanted to change things around. I wanted to be more than a task driven developer, and I also wanted to think strategically so that I can give solutions maybe
Right.
after about 6 to 7 months of experience. So I started asking questions and understanding and doing research at a very early stage. When someone told me that, hey, this is the project that you might be working on, I would not wait for someone to show me where the documentation is, right? I have access to the pages on our in our organization, and no, how much ever is visible to me, you can always go search and always connect the dots. And I think
Right.
that I did very differently when I got this role, and that has helped me a lot to grow and understand the data story and to be able to contribute to my role much better.
So you
Yeah.
sort of find it easy to go into new departments, network with people. Is that something that came naturally to you?
So I'm a extrovert,
Right.
like an ambivert also due to COVID, but like definitely talking to people, and so I would even during my internship I would like go ask everyone what teams that they're a part of, and what kind of work that they do, what their day looks like. We also had this program where we would meet different managers, right, and like understand what and then also another thing is that not only just IT, I would also take part in events in the organization. So you're meeting engineers, you are going for an event which could be like a CSR activity, but just making that connect and understanding that, hey, this is where my product is being used, and
Right.
understanding a bigger picture. So I think that helped me a lot. Networking helped me a lot. I haven't done this in a while, but I would also, try and have lunch with a different team or a different person once a week, to kind of just like see what's happening in the organization, so that I can see if we can collaborate together and build something more. And I think that is also super useful. Yeah.
Another lovely point, Kanika, that you don't have lunch with the same person, or you maximize the number of people that you have lunch with, because that is something that you can do at least 5 to 6 times a month, or even 10 times a month.
Easily.
The idea
Yeah.
is just to reach out and talk to people. I don't know why at times people find it very hard to sort of strike up a conversation, because today everyone sends messages. We are in the age of responding when we feel like it. So a
Oh,
face to
definitely.
face conversation, I've noticed, tends to actually make people a little wary.
Yes.
Hey, there'll be moments of awkwardness, there'll be silence. I'm trying to figure out what to say next.
Yeah.
But I think if you overcome that, there's nothing like a conversation
Nothing
that
like it.
enriches what you actually learn and what the other
Oh,
person gets from you.
oh, definitely. I think
So,
going to office, meeting people over tea, even just going by in the corridor, right? I was
yeah,
just like walking down the corridor the other day, and they were like, "Hey, I think I need some help in this tool that you're good at. Can we just quickly meet for 10 minutes and work on it?" And I resolved the
okay,
problem in about 5 minutes. And they
wow,
were like, "Oh, I was just thinking so much on like whether I should text you or not on WebEx, or like." I was like, "Hey, just drop by. If you're in office,
right,
just like go say hi to as many as people as you can, and you never
right,
know how
right.
that'll work in your favor, right?" Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
can you take me through one or two of the data projects that you did? How did it come to you? What were some of the things that you were working with? How did you resolve it? That kind of experience.
Sure, Venu. So, one of the recent projects, so I can give you like two kind of projects, right? One is an ad hoc project that comes to you um, from the result of things that are happening in the organization, and another project is like an initiative of sorts, right? The approach in both these projects is very different. So one of the so the ad hoc project is something that has happened very recently. So in Texas Instruments, we have a lot of reorgs. Things keep moving around. Managers change, teams change, and a result of this reorg within IT, the impact is usually minimal. But if the reorg is happening in business, there is a lot of impact downstream on the reports that we
Right,
have. So, just to give like an example without not saying a lot of giving a lot of details, right? Is
right.
that we had about five business organizations, and suddenly one of them broke down into another. So we now have six. What we had to do, this change happened on a Friday evening, and through the next week, it is the role of the reporting team, that is the all the data analysts, the data engineers, to make changes in our data product, to make changes in our report, to make sure that the new team that has been added flows in effortlessly. In some cases, it does. But in some cases where it doesn't, what we have to do is we need to go do an impact analysis, right? We're doing an impact analysis to see that, okay, what are the changes that we need to make? Do we need to change filters somewhere? If I do this change, will it break something else? Right? So that is a week long process, but you need to do it so quickly because the changes happened on a Friday. They expected to also go in the reports on the same day, even
Okay,
though we got to know about it on Friday. So basically, you got to working really fast, right? And this is something you don't have control over. You have no information in advance. So working fast and working and making sure that if you're stuck somewhere, you work with people who've done this before and kind of resolve it really quickly. So this is one of the ad hoc projects. data projects that come into us. And another one
Okay,
is in terms,
just
yeah,
hold that for a minute, Kanika. I'll come back
sure,
at that. Okay.
sure.
You're listening to the My First Job podcast. I'm Venugopal. I head Ideascape, a company which is into branding, creative, and design. I'm speaking to Kanika, who's been at Texas Instruments for the last 8 years. And she gives you wonderful points on why it helps to stay and learn with one organization. While common wisdom today is that you need to keep shifting, and that is the only way you can grow. Kanika gave us wonderful examples of how she was able to move from working on applications to moving into data. And she gave us a couple of examples on how the data is actually deployed, what are the kind of advantages, and how it learns. The other important thing that she spoke about was about networking, about getting to know other people within the same organization. And I love the fact that she said that she has lunch with several people. And that does two things. One is that you get to know about what's happening in some other place, and some other person knows you. It's not just your team. And I think that's a very important part of uh, how things within an organization work and how much you can do if you make the effort. In the next segment, I will continue to talk to Kanika on data projects and what is involved and what does a data analyst do day after day. So, Kanika, the next stage, which is you were about to tell me that there was another data project. So, why don't you just go there? Let's start with that.
Sure, Venu. So another data project that I've been working on for the last couple of months, right, is like an initiative and involves a lot of teams. So we have the management, we have the operations team, and then we have us, the data engineers. So sometimes the management talks to the operations team and they're like, hey, we have like all of this information. Can you please sit down and make sense out of it? Right? And the operations team understands the management's requirement, and then they work with us, the data team. So, as a part of the data team, there are three things that we do again. One is streamline all the raw data that we have. So we have data coming in from the factories. We have data coming in from the website in terms of orders that we have. We have data coming in from uh, the factories in terms of inventory and in terms of how much is being produced. And to be able to connect this, first thing is to analyze all of this information and join it together and create a data product. So that is step one. Once the data product is created, the operations team kind of checks through, runs a couple of examples, says that, okay, so basically they're doing like a real time test, right? To give you an example, they will be like, okay, for say X number of parts, how much quantity do we have in China, or how much quantity do we have in Taiwan? And if all of that matches, we're like, okay, let's go ahead and like visualize it and see what data we can see. So that's when I come into the picture. And so I do data product creation as well. So now another trend in all product based and IT companies is that one person does everything if they have to, right? So the next thing we're doing is we are developing visualizations using a tool called Spotfire. So we're helping them visualize and then decide what the patterns are like over time. What are the trends that they see? What is the percentage that is risky and what is where they're going well, right? And if they can see and then they understand the story, they change the way things need to happen in a particular department, right? And I think that overall just helps us know that the kind of work that we're doing is changing a lot of things for the company. And that is why you always want to make sure that you're accurate, because um, the impact is
Very important.
huge. Very important. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about because I can relate this to an external process. Now, there was this pest control thing that I had taken up a subscription for on an annual basis. The company got taken over by another company. Uh, and that was a merger, and this whole system broke because I found that I couldn't fix up appointments anymore. People didn't get informed in the field. The guy who had to come home didn't come. So after about 2 months, I just gave up on the company and moved completely out. I can understand that there are internal problems, but this data integration gets all the more complex when it's two companies which are not related. In your case, at least you have control over all the data that you're currently working with because it's all internally generated. I think it gets trickier when it has to connect to several outside sources over which you may not have control, right? Am I right in assuming that?
Yes, yes, we have those situations as well. There is a
Okay.
project that I'm going to be working on where we are going to be analyzing how our competitors are doing and how we are doing and kind of compare that. So when the data is
Okay.
coming from outside in terms of competitors,
Yeah.
it's not as simple, right? There is
Right.
so many things that need to be changed and how they're going to be tied together and everything. So that's upcoming. So I can't really say how I'm going to resolve it, but like I know what
Yeah.
you mean, and I already
Yeah.
know the challenges with it. Yeah.
Right. The other thing which I wanted to talk about is that I think the early years of e-commerce and everything else, they gathered the data which was easy to gather in the sense that, okay, how many visitors to the site? Because I can track that. When was the product bought? Then, I have a certain time at which the product was bought. But the thing that is important is figuring out if these customers, how often do they come back? Or is it that are they increasing the value of whatever they are buying? Because that again happens over time. You get to look at data and then figure out, hey, this might be interesting, but I don't have a way of collecting this as yet, or I don't have a way of connecting this to some other data which I can then figure out how it will work. So are these kind of things happening all the time within?
Yes. So that happens. So we do data. We once we've collected all the data that we have, right? We have prediction models to help us predict all of this information and unknowns that you're
Right.
talking about, right? So that is how we actually are able to decide how much do we actually make this year so that we are all on time and we have space for new customers. So this is done by the data scientists where they come up with prediction models within based on the collection that we have, and then we also analyze based on that data. So that is step 2 again in terms of analysis. So once they have given us the data of the future that we might need, and then we go back and like kind of compare with what's today and what can be tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So let's just cycle back a bit and look at salaries because that's something that people, who are getting into this business are extremely eager to know. So, what kind of salaries are, within the data analyst field? What kind of salaries do people start out with, and what are the various levels they can aspire to get to?
Very the question that all people have from right out of college, right? Completely relatable.
Yeah.
So Venu, one thing in data analyst, right, is that the scope is really huge. You can join a service based company like Infosys, TCS, etc. You can join product based companies. And in product based companies itself, right, you have a lot of fields where data analyst is required everywhere. Now, every company prefers that they have so much data, they don't want it going outside, they want to
Right.
analyze it internally. So, you can join a healthcare company, a financial company, a semiconductor company, and so the salary ranges are different in both, right? So if you're joining a service based company, your salaries can be anywhere between 6 to 10 lakh when you start, right? Because that is again a very different model altogether. But when you're joining a product based company, your salaries can start up anywhere after 10 to 12 lakhs. right, per year. And if you're joining a financial company or a company in healthcare, sometimes the value can be even higher. And it definitely goes up as in when you experience and the more uh, depth of knowledge that you get. And that is one of the reasons why you should stay and get that
Right,
domain knowledge and become that subject matter expert that
right,
we
right.
need today. Yeah.
And that's a another wonderful point. Stay in an organization of your learning, make more friends during lunch, acquire deep domain expertise. Because without these three things falling perfectly into sync, your career will simply, you'll be like that stone skipping across the water. You'll never get depth.
Depth. Yeah. That is so
You,
true.
so I think that's a wonderful, these three things I think are very important for anyone who's trying to look at getting into this. Now, in about 8 to 10 years, I think people can look at extremely rewarding salaries and progress. But in terms of stress, which do you think are the less stressful and the more stressful data analyst jobs?
I don't think there is a less stressful data analyst job at all.
Okay,
Now that you think so, just to give you like a so we have a running joke in our
okay,
organization where when I ask the stakeholders that, hey, by when do you need this? They smile at me and they're like, we needed this yesterday. So the idea is that it's a very, very fast moving team in any organization because if you are not giving us the numbers through data analysis, right, you are going back. You're missing out. You're missing out on a very important uh, point in deciding what can make the company grow, right? So um, compared to my previous organization to now, um, I feel like in the last 2.5 years, I haven't gotten bored one single day because every day is different when you are a data analyst. But when you're an application developer, it is, one straight line kind of thing. So data analyst jobs are not stressful at all. I think even our support team is always on their foot, helping us move reports from development to production, and that has to happen accurately at the right time. um, so to give you an example, right, like recently, 2 weeks ago, I had a release. I'm working on a report. Everything is done from my side. Everything is perfect. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to relax and, over to the support team to move the report from one environment to the next environment so that they can test it out. And I'm like, my job's done. But
okay,
things happened in the support environment, like in the infrastructure, that are not in my control, but I'm
right.
definitely answerable, and I am definitely have to do analysis. So what was happening is the report that was taking me about 30 minutes to load suddenly started taking about 4.5 hours to load.
Wow.
And because the systems was suddenly slowing down because the volume of data, not because of my report but because of other reports in the organization.
Okay.
And that is something that I did not predict at all.
Right.
So the period that you think is like a cooling period between this project and the next project, which is like hardly 2 3 days, is gone in, like, working on this. So there is stress all through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Point well made. Now
Yeah.
tell me, what is the difference between structured and unstructured data? Because that is something that, there are companies which have come in and promised to help with unstructured data, and they say that we'll work with lakes of data and big data and all of these things. So, can you throw a little light on some of the jargon which is bandied about in the industry so that people who are coming in get an understanding of where they should start rather than say, okay, let me jump into big data because that's where the future is.
Right.
When do you start telling? Yeah.
Sure, Venu. Great question. So, definitely, any new company, startups, and organizations that have large volume of data. So TI, product-based company, has large volumes of data, and we have started thinking of unstructured data. So unstructured data is something like, um, let me give a very simple example, right? We have a car. If we had to structure the data of a car, we will make sure that we're always asking that, hey, does it have, is it a fuel car? What kind of fuel it has, sorry. And, how many cylinders it has, whether it is automatic, manual. These are the four, five, maybe, just to like have a, so that's structured.
Right.
But now suppose the kind of number of cars that have come in, um, sometimes we have the manual car, we have an electric car, we have a petrol car. So we want to have all of this information in the database, but when we're like talking about what fuel, we can't write electric there, right? So we will have another field
Okay.
for it, but that field will be kind of blank for, say, a Hyundai car, which is not electric, right?
Right.
So that is why we have a process where you can have some attributes which can be empty, but in a structured form that's not possible all the time, right? So and that's one of the reasons why it's faster, right? Now what is happening is, if you're working in an organization that is really old, that has high volume data, uh, they prefer to have everything in a structured format. They don't want things going wrong, uh, because of new technology coming in that is changing every day. They want
Right.
stability, right? So I think it's great to have so many options, but to you should know what your forte is. So my forte is definitely structured language, even though my projects back in college were unstructured data, and I absolutely loved it. But then the beauty and the of this is different in itself, right? And I think focusing on what works for you and the organization is like really important here.
Right. And I think you gave a wonderful example in terms of how to work with structured and unstructured data. But is there, for people coming in, obviously they will not have to worry about data structures starting straight away because they are not going to be exposed to anything that is mission critical. Early on they will be tested on things which are small to begin with. But what is the career path to somebody who wants to work with large sets of data and feels that, hey, I want to be in that business or I want to work in that stream? Where do they start? Is it the same route? It's simply that you will then get chances within.
So I think for someone starting out, the key would definitely be to focus on basics. One thing I see lacking in like a couple of people who joining the organization currently, right? They focus on all the cool new things, but forget the basics of why we need the data and how we can join the data in different ways and how to not have duplication of data, right? And I think I would say that if you have your basics strong, you can adapt yourself to anything that comes in the future, right? So focus on that. And anyone who wants to kind of work with large data sets, definitely great to know the kind of infrastructure or the kind of tools that are coming in to handle this better and suggest that to organizations. So I think one of the cool things that has been happening is when people want to join an organization, now it's not just a typical interview, right? They do some research on the company and they give them an analysis of, hey, this is something that's been happening. So recently I was reading, I actually even met this person where she's a product manager, and what she decided to do was she downloaded the Zepto rider app, and she was a Zepto delivery agent for one day. And whatever she observed during that day, she kind of wrote an article and like a couple of series of findings and sent it to the uh, organization. and
Right.
the changes were made as it is. And it's like a very quick and easy opportunity to get like a
Wonderful.
new job. So I think even in data there's a lot of scope to do this, because a lot of data is available online where you can analyze and you can show them that, hey, this is what I think can be done. Are you looking into it? So I think,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Great. So let me just take a short detour. You're listening to the My First Job podcast. I'm speaking to Kanika, and she's spoken about how she has worked with structured and unstructured data. She's explained it with a wonderful example of, let's say, if you're analyzing a database of cars and they come from various segments, they come from various fuel options. It's not just the basic things which have to be analyzed. She also talked about salaries and how salaries differ between product companies and service companies. And she talked about how, if you want a career path in data analytics, get your basics right. Don't be diverted with newfangled things about what is the most happening thing in data right now. Because all of that is incidental if your foundations aren't strong. I'll spend a couple of minutes on understanding what those foundations are. I will also speak to Kanika on how AI is going to change data analysis, and let's see where it goes from here. Okay, so Kanika, what are the foundations for a data analyst to? You said the basics. So, what are the basics? If you can just expand on that.
Sure. So we're talking in terms of as basic as understanding how to write queries in SQL, how to write packages, how to write efficient queries that are not taking a long time to run, and finding the most optimum way to consolidate data. Because now, today, what I'm doing is I'm working with five different data sources, and each data source has like 3 to 4 GBs of data. But I want all of them tied together. So, how am I going to do that? Right. And I think that um, if you have your basics strong, you can definitely optimize this properly, and then your future report is definitely going to be flawless, right? Yeah.
Okay, so did your start in writing applications build some kind of discipline? Do you think that that is a good route to look at?
Oh, yes, definitely. Actually, one of the first things that I did when I came from a different organization to mine, I saw that when you're building an application, right, and you have code, um, there is so much structure to it in terms of approval processes and having a backup of the previous code, right? Uh, in the query world that I am in the data world that I'm in right now, there is no backup of what if I made a change today, I added a new column or I added a new logic in my query, there is no backup, right? And that freaked me out so much, even in terms of reports, right? I've been given something to work on a new report, and they like go around, play with it, and what I they expect me to do is they're like, okay, go create a copy and work on it. But yes, that's definitely one way to go, but just knowing that having different versions of it, right? So I've tried to implement version control in our database queries when I joined the team, and this is because of how I understood my practice in applications world was, right? And also, I think writing queries earlier, I would just like when I started off, you're writing very simple queries to fetch data from one or two tables, right? But I think
Okay,
as the volume increases, the complexity also increases, and you need to have version control, which I learned from like the applications team. So yeah.
okay, okay. Wonderful. Let me ask you a slightly tricky question, which is that when startups begin, they have very little data to go on. It's the large companies which have, let's say years and decades of data. But startups have to navigate initially by instinct because there isn't data available. Okay. But there is a point at which they get very reliant on that data, and instinct takes a backseat to the point where what does the data say is the only thing that people look at. In the long run, do you think that it helps to have some part of the business navigating on instinct? Otherwise, you're never going to take risks. Or it should be entirely data driven. What is your take?
Very interesting question and definitely a tricky one. I think a mix of both is definitely required. And I think I see that in my organization as well, right? Sometimes I think at this level, I'm not sure of a lot of because I don't talk to the management a lot. I don't know about right now, but in my early days, the smaller reports that I built for my applications team, right? Yes, my data is telling me the story that there are more bugs than features or something like that, right? But um, the experience of the project manager is definitely far more than the what the data is saying. So I think when I saw them mix both their expertise and what the data is saying is when they were actually able to um, make more value out of the reports that we had. And I think that is the key. Not forgetting the nature of the business, but also working with the data. Because sometimes data can also be wrong, right? Um, Sometimes it's like a peak, right? Assuming, and that might not show you consistency, but years of experience that you have will show you the graph more better in a way.
That's
Yeah.
true. Now, it's always going to be a bit of a stretch in terms of preserving the instinctive part, because any field you look at today, whether it's doctors or engineers or any person who goes to a hospital first has to first go through a whole range of checks,
Yeah.
because the era of family physicians where people just navigated by instinct, they knew the family doctor knew the whole family, and she would prescribe maybe one or two tests, or he or she. But today that's not the case at all. It's almost as if you need one whole dashboard of data in order to figure out
Yeah.
what condition, because the whole thing about symptoms and relying on instincts and is all gone. So I think
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that is that our reliance on data is good, but that point at which it becomes over reliance and it becomes a constriction is, I think, something
Very
that
thin line.
companies may not. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
very thin line. So, and this thing between privacy and convenience, it's again another thin line. We are navigating
Yeah.
thinner and thinner lines all the time,
Yes.
which I think is the difficult part, because you can do a job, but maybe that's the other thing. As you grow, have you found that it's not just the job that you're doing, but you're also saying, hey, is this something that has other repercussions as well? Because you're looking at something. I look at advertising, and the earlier thing used to be that you never bothered about uh, anything that you were working on. And then suddenly there's this thing about, hey, this product category, is it morally right? Uh,
Yeah.
you
I
know
see what you mean.
these things get a little dicey, and it can't be dissected just with data. So I think there is a point at which the humanness and the data aspect are kind of wrestling with each other. So do you think that that is likely, or in a field like what you're in, it's very straight, it's perfectly clear?
So I think in my domain, I haven't seen a lot of difference as such, but like I think maybe for a more a company where there are like a lot of products and a lot of different things involved, I think that would come into picture. Yeah.
That would come into being. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So let me now talk about another thing which I think is going to be making a big difference. When you started out in as a data analyst, maybe about 5 years into after writing applications, you probably never looked at AI as something that would impact your job in a big way. But now that AI is here, what do you think? Because the base level jobs, it's almost as if you sit in a meeting and a summary is given out immediately at the end of. It's just taking the conversation, telling you this is what happened. So, what do you think the job of the data analyst is going to evolve into?
So, great question, Minu. Definitely, it's happening all over where everyone is feeling like AI is going to take over their jobs. Um, I think in a company like mine, right, what I experience is that the adoption of AI and ML is relatively lesser, but it's not going to completely take over your jobs in a company which is a product based company and is very protective of their data, right? Some companies, they're okay with all the data being analyzed on like a cloud AI platform. And so basically, the idea is anyone has access to that data, but TI refuses to do that. So we have AI and ML platforms on premise, but that adoption has happened only, say, less than 6 months ago. And we
Okay,
still have like a long way to go. But I definitely see it add a lot of value where um, we the things that we were doing that were taking time, like say optimizing a query, right, that I spoke about. So recently I have started optimizing my query using AI in a tool within the organization, but we're again very protective over doing that because we don't want the structure that we have going out, because we don't want
right,
other people
very
to have
true,
the same structure,
very true.
right? So I think in companies like that, we are definitely good, and there is use of AI and ML, but uh, the opportunities are large. Even sometimes when we see that, we recently had a demo of a AI tool where they were talking about how the analysis and the prediction models can be built by AI, right? And it was amazing to see how it is possible in one fifth of the time, right? That we usually take, and we see that definitely adding value to the organization. But one thing, no matter AI comes in or not, there is always going to be a human validation step. There is always an expert who will have to validate that, hey, this is what this piece of code, or this data that you have analyzed works for us. And that is only possible if you have the domain knowledge and you understand the system thoroughly, and that nobody can take away
Understood,
from you. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
The point that I'm coming from is, let's say, at the point at which I began to use a phone, we were still using rotary dial phones. And then it became push button. And
Yeah.
then it became your smartphones.
Yes.
Okay. So the person who's using the smartphone has absolutely no need to know about what the rotary dial was. Okay. So there is a transition which happens, and then people, the old ways kind of wither away because they're no longer necessary. But it always helps to have an idea of where this technology came from, which I think AI tends to gloss over, in the sense that it tells you it's not important to understand the underlying stuff.
Yeah.
You just have to ask your query and things will happen. And this is the crazy part, that for people with experience, they can ask the complex query because they have knowledge of the underlying business. But to a fresher, somebody who's just coming in, they will start with the most basic prompts,
Yes.
and they're not going to be able to leverage AI at all.
At all. Yeah.
So that's where I find this whole, sort of
Yeah.
conflict,
Yeah.
because I don't know. Yes, it is important because the amount of data that is needs to be analyzed is growing exponentially every year, every day. Because I see the volume of data that's being generated on social media and everything else. And then you say, okay, if you need to make sense of this, you have to run it through a machine because there's no way a human is going to be able to do this.
Yes.
And then, okay, that. So, in your case, where do you think this will go to? What are the things that you feel will happen? And but I think you've answered that. Maybe we are getting too sucked up into that. Let me talk about what do you do in mentoring? What are the
Sure,
roles
Vin.
that you have done and what do you find interesting? That's what we'll close out with today.
Sure, Vin. Great question. I've had the most wonderful experience mentoring. Mentored a lot of different kind of people, and that come from I always wanted to be a mentor, like how my mentor was to me when I started the organization, to basically help the person grow and make sure that when they've joined the company, when and 6 months later, they actually feel the difference. That they are two complete different people and they've grown so much. So that happened to me with my mentor and even mentors in the career after. Um, that so I've mentored developers and testers from our managed services or like service based companies that I kind of work with. So you're mentoring them in terms of understanding how the organization works, explaining to them that hey, this is the kind of process that we have, because they come from a very different mindset, right? And they come from a very task driven mindset, and to kind of open up a bigger picture for them so that not only can they benefit from that, but also we can benefit from their contributions, right? That is one. And then we also have mentorship programs where I'm mentoring interns who are joining in from like different organizations, sorry, from different colleges. So every year we have like an internship program, and last summer I had an intern for about 2.5 3 months, and it was amazing how one of the key things that I think, there were two things that had happened right in those 2.5 months. We had changed the location of the organization, our team. So, and we had changed, there was a reorg and our manager had changed, right? And the intern was so nervous, was so nervous about both these changes coming in at this time. And he was like, I just settled in, I only have another 2 months to prove and get my work done. What do I do? And it's very easy for me to be like, hey, no, I mean, this is just part of the job, like kind of just like, go ahead with it. But I think understanding and making the intern feel that, hey, this is the reason this has happened, and we got to see light in it. And, being patient with any of the interns that have come in and explaining to them what the bigger picture is like, added that value for him. And uh, as he progressed with the projects, right, we had like a lot of reruns in terms of the presentation that he had to give in the mid of his internship and then the end of the internship. And one of the key things I realized was the way you give feedback is super important, because you have to give it in the most kindest way possible, and for the other person to accept, and also have an expectation that he or she will not listen to everything that you have to say. But when you see the change, that how he's worked on the feedback, right, and you see the person grow, is when you realize that, okay, yeah, I've kind of mentored this person, right? So now he
Wonderful.
actually got converted and he came back, and you see him talk about and say the same points that you would to him. You've kind
He's
of just
wonderful.
cracked the
Yeah.
code. Yeah.
Thank you, Kanika. We'll have to leave it
Yes.
there because we've run plumb out of time. But thank you for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. And here's wishing you the very best at TI in the future.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Renu. Thank you.
Okay. That was Kanika. And I got to talk to her about a lot of things in data analysis, which was beyond the job. So subscribe, share, and let your friends know this is something that you can continue to share with them.